I'll let you in on a little secret. We'll let you in on a little secret for the 200-pound dumbbells. It's kind of a circus sideshow trick.
All right.
Those dumbbells are so long that if you bring them up and you angle them slightly, they'll hit your chest, and your elbow isn't anywhere near parallel. Right?
You did sumo.
So you're kind of doing 3/4 reps, right?
Right. Welcome to Vigorous Podcast. Today I'm joined with a man who doesn't really need an introduction. His accolades are a laundry list long. There's so many accolades, so many things you accomplished, Stan.
Oh, go ahead, give it a try. Just list them
off. Give
it
a try. Okay. So the writer of the Vertical Diet 1, 2, and 3. Right? You finished with a 2,300 total in your career?
Something around that, yeah.
Somewhere around that. At one point, you were the strongest bodybuilder and one of the strongest men on the planet.
Yeah, age will put a dent in that for you.
Yeah, of course. But, and for new technology and people get, a little bit earlier in the sport and, they know that it's possible because you accomplished it. And then the threshold is removed. Designer of the cooler. You're a very successful businessman. You live in Las Vegas, married with kids. I mean, you want me to go on?
No, that's good.
Fill me in.
I just like to hear it every now and then,
Of course, yeah. Of course, it feels good, right? So I wanted to get you on to talk about multiple different things, but I want to go straight to the target. Everybody's waiting for an updated vertical diet. And I remember you told me when we met in Las Vegas at the Mr. Olympia a couple months ago that a vertical diet 4.1 or 4.0 is in the making with Dr. Damon. So let's start there because I'm patiently waiting for an update. Yeah.
As I've said, that this has been a living document since the time I released it some 6 years ago with Vertical Diet 1.0. Some things change, as science changes. The vertical diet expanded to include more and more questions that people had that I answered. Originally, it was created for my clients to give them everything that I thought they needed to do. As you know, it's multifactorial. You can't just do one thing, you got to do everything. So it's not just the diet, it's obviously sleep, digestion, hydration, it's calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, of course, but we did, blood testing and we addressed hormones and then we have things like the high blood sugar and high blood pressure quick fix kit and, a lot of the stuff that's related to metabolic syndrome for the big athletes and then things just like menus, grocery shopping lists, compliance
kind of expanded,
tips
right, into like
cardio stuff.
More people can use it now because it's very popular, and I see so many success stories over the last couple of years.
Supplements, obviously, myths in the industry. Seems like we spend most of our time just dispelling, myths, and I call it the shiny object syndrome when our clients, want to show us something on Instagram every other day and. You've got to steer them back onto course as to what really matters. So, and Damon and I got together end of last year and spent, I probably spent over 100 hours with Damon creating the Vertical Diet 3.0. For those people who don't know, Damon's the co-author of the Vertical Diet, and he's a PhD RDN LD who was director of dietetics at UNLV and an instructor there in the exercise phys department. So, and he attached, I think it was damn near 500 references, peer-reviewed scientific published research to every aspect of what we covered to make sure that this thing stayed out of the guru realm. I didn't want to be tagged as that guy.
Same as my ebooks. Like my ebooks are purely from my own experience, and then of course I use some scientific literature in there, but I didn't really include any. Review papers because the problem is when you start dabbling into pharmacology, there's so much conflicting stuff that I feel that a lot of guys that they kind of cherry pick. The further back you go, the more obscure the evidence gets. But of course, for a diet and this kind of information for a broad audience, I think it's very beneficial to include some references. Yeah.
I agree. And when I first launched the Rhinos Rant some years ago, I said, I'm going to give you my advice from my experience. Because there's peer-reviewed published research that'll fall in on either side of any argument. That doesn't mean that it's equivalent by any sense of stretch of the imagination. But my experience isn't just, it's not just my N of one. It's obviously from college to coaching to competing to collaborating with great athletes over the years. It's outcome oriented, and it is, I endeavored to make sure that it was supported by the science. So anyhow, to get back to the original question, the Vertical Diet 4.0 is currently being edited and compiled, and a lot of the infographics are being created for it. We should hopefully have it out. I've been saying this for 6 months, but these things, but once you get going on these things, they, and then you have to worry about, again, whether or not you're giving accurate information, and that you provide the proper context and nuance, because when you can't paint with a broad brush, because you've got, even in studies that might give you a statistically significant outcome, you've got inter-individual variability, and you have to address the people that were non-responders or hyper-responders and everybody in between. So nonetheless, I did throw in a high cholesterol quick fix kit. We did some stuff on diabetes management, both type 1 and type 2. A lot more stuff for women. I've worked with female clients since the early 90s up to the pro level, including Nadia Wyatt, who took third in the Miss Olympia. 3 CrossFit national champions. I'm currently working with the U.S. Women's Olympic wrestling team. And I've worked with a lot of high school, collegiate, and professional females for damn near 30 years. And so we go pretty hard in on the female triad, things like PCOS, Candida, those kinds of things.
Oh, wow. So it's really all encompassing now.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going in that direction,
stuff.
Yeah.
Some of my clients, a lot of my clients, I know everybody associates me with athletes, but the vast majority of our clients, as you know, are dad bods and soccer moms. It's Gen Pop.
Yeah.
So,
right. But they want to turn themselves into athletes. That's why they go the vertical way, right? They have a starting point, and then they might, want to improve their health and their overall fitness and longevity and that kind of stuff. And I think a diet like yours is a great starting point, to really get all the basics down and then excel, still following the same stuff.
Agreed. I think you and I feel the same way, that everybody's kind of an athlete inside, and we like to design the program based on the fact that we're going to be recommending and hoping that they'll be complying with some sort of resistance training program and some cardio and certainly sleep optimization and a healthy diet that supports all of that. So yeah, my macro recommendations are for active individuals, and I wouldn't propose a comprehensive plan for anybody, even if it's just for weight loss, that didn't include some weight training, and some pretty aggressive, progressive resistance training. And I've worked with a lot of, now that I'm 55, of course, I'm always shocked when people in their 20s, recognize my work and come talk to me and ask me questions. But a lot of my clients are in their 40s and 50s. These are postmenopausal women. And so we talk about the hormones that are involved in that. And of course, I'm not a doctor, I don't prescribe, but I like to bring them the information and point them in the direction. I think you and I have both worked with Merrick Health. And so I make sure and get them in front of the professionals that can ultimately diagnose and prescribe for them, but steering them into a blood test and exposing them to some of the potential things that they'll need to address. So I work a lot more on fatigue management, pain, DOMS, rehab stuff. I throw in some fun stuff on, say, organic versus conventional. That's always raises.
That's always a popular topic. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And we go into gout. I talk more in depth about tracking sleep with things like an Oura Ring or that kind of stuff. Continuous glucose monitoring.
It sounds like this ebook is going to be like 500 pages.
And that's the nice thing about eBooks is that there's no limit to the number of pages that I can put in. And we get into some of the longevity research. As you know, that industry has exploded as of late, and there's been lots of pretty incredible claims made, of course. And we get into the details of metformin, rapamycin, MMN. I just want my clients, and this is because these are questions that are asked of me, and they trust that I'll do the research. And as you know from the diet, I refer to the experts in the industry. And I say, here's what the academic professionals that are regarded as, kind of the go-to people by their peers in the industry. And that doesn't mean I get nutrition advice from chiropractics. I get nutrition advice from PhDs in nutrition.
Exactly.
and you know what I'm getting at there. But things like acne, probiotics. I even go into the blue zone myths and the China study and things like that.
All right. Okay.
Just questions I get from people,
Man, I can't wait to read this. It's going to be so exciting when it's done.
And It is. I mean, I don't take deep dives. I refer them to where that information is more available if they want to, but I kind of summarize just to maybe dispel some myths and again, refocus them. You know as well as I, because you've been on social media for years now, that we get, dozens, if not 50 to 100 DMs a day.
Yeah.
And that totals
Hundreds.
over the course of 5 or 6 years, over 100,000 DMs that I've personally received. And I'm sure you're in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
And we've endeavored to respond to the majority of those when possible. Eventually it becomes pretty onerous. And, I refer people to the vertical diet, but I don't want to seem like I'm pitching I'm trying to sell them something, but it's very comprehensive. I did the research so that I could.
A lot of the commonly asked questions are already covered there, and it's the same with my content here on YouTube and the ebooks. People ask the same question, the same 100 questions always get asked, and that is how we're able to produce content, whether those are videos or 10-minute walks, or seminars, which you've done quite a few of, or ebooks. Like most of the commonly asked questions are answered, and then once in a while there's a goldmine question in there which never really got answered, but is very important to include. And then you spend the hours researching because you realize, okay, this could not only benefit the person that is asking it, but also, a ton of other people who just probably never thought of asking this particular question. And that's how the content grows. And you see that over, 6 years that the vertical diet has been around, or, the couple of years that my YouTube channel has been around. Over time, the answers and the scope of the answer kind of changes and also expands. So, you get to a position where you always have to answer it like, it kind of depends. Because if there's 10 different scenarios, there's 10 different answers. And that makes it a little bit annoying for the audience because they're like, yeah, but I want the hard answer. But it depends. Let's dive in a little bit further. So, and that's of course how, the content gets super, super big.
Yeah, I was in South Carolina at Sorenex's Summer Strong, and they had 700 people attend, and a lot of them were S&C coaches from high schools and colleges. And those are hard groups to present in front of, and they're, because they're all ages, they're both men and women, and young and old, different goals, different genetic predispositions, all of those things. And those are the hardest groups to present to because, again, you can't paint with a broad brush. I get one-on-one with someone, and it's a slam dunk because you can just quickly pinpoint in on the right questions and answers, and then help guide and steer them to the path that'll work for them. So that's the challenge with social media. You cannot. Yeah. You'll see people. I did an hour-and-a-half podcast with Tom Bilyeu last year, and someone clipped out that one spot where I said that 95% of health benefits are realized simply from weight loss itself, irrespective of the diet. And I said even the McDonald's diet fell into that category. And then they cut off the point where I said I would never recommend a McDonald's diet, for a variety of reasons. But what was stated is what was true. And when people take things out of context, or they take 30 seconds out of a 1 hour interview, they lose, I think, the important nuance of the information.
And that's why sometimes these shorts on Instagram or YouTube are so dangerous, because you want to present even if you produce them yourself, you want to present the information the best way possible, but you also want to get clicks and, make it go further to grow your audience. So it's sometimes a little bit controversial. And then you see in the comments, like, wait a minute, this is not what I meant in the bigger video that lasts an hour, that I spent days on researching and days on recording and days of editing.
That's right.
I needed to promote this video. So I took a little clip, and then of course, people go wild, and then you're the bad guy. But it's just unfortunately that's kind of how it happens. And you see it with even bigger names like Joe Rogan or some of the other, larger channels, that they get clipped and then it runs rampant. But I think, what all we can do is kind of stay true to who we are and just try to inspire people to learn, especially like your vertical diet and the 10-minute walks. It's like, I used to watch those, and I have a notepad ready just to write something down for further research later on, right? That's how I like to do research. I get inspired by a guy like you, and I'm like, okay, there must be more to this. And then I start doing my own research. Same with the vertical diet, right? It brings everything together. And what really got it to me was all this, emphasis on micronutrients, which I was always very for, but I couldn't really find that anywhere else besides, until you started talking about it. And then you realize, I know a lot. There's more to learn. And this gives me like a good percentage, a good bulk of what I want to know, but there's so much more. And you just keep learning and learning and learning. And I think more people realize that, wait a minute, I don't completely understand what he's talking about, but I can if I put in the research, right?
Yeah, I tried to keep it simple, sensible, and sustainable, as you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. You may have to make it understandable for everybody, because not everybody gets to that level where you have really fundamental insight and grasp of what we're talking about, and so much more beyond that. That's not for everybody. A lot of people simply don't have time for that, or they're not at that level yet where they want to learn more because they're not healthy yet, or they don't see the benefit of having that knowledge. So I think people are really looking forward to Vertical 4.0.
Yeah.
Well, I sure am. I'll be one of the first ones to buy it, add it to the collection.
I don't want them to have to learn all of it. It's like, you ever been to a chiropractic's office and they try and teach you anatomy and physiology? It's like, hey, just fix me, right? Just do your thing.
Yeah, right. That's true also. Yeah, sometimes you just want the solution.
Yeah, I get clients to come to me and you and I very quickly and somewhat even superficially can start to get a glassy-eyed client. It's just overwhelming. It's not their ballpark. It's just not what they spend their time doing. They got kids, they got a career, and they just come in. And here's what's challenging. The vertical diet's a very specific plan, and I talk about the reasons why. I say there's many paths to the same destination, but I still have to give them directions. I give them a path, and for a host of reasons why I'm suggesting that it's a good path for them. But there's other alternatives as well. But what they ask me for is, Stan, just tell me exactly what to eat. Or Stan, just tell me exactly how to train. They want an actual workout written down. And you and I both know that could be there's just so much variability that you could provide them. And you have to get some specific questions in. When do you like to eat? What do you like to eat? Well, where do you like to eat in terms of dieting and in terms of training? What's your goal? What's your focus? When can you train? And do you have any injuries or what do you enjoy doing? Because as I've said before, the best diet's the one you'll follow, and the best exercise is the one you'll do. And
exactly.
So I lead with compliance. It's kind of where I fall. Where I kind of go sideways with some of the popular diets out there is that I just don't see that they're sustained very long, and that to me is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of diets out there that are touted to be the best thing ever, and then they make it so obscure that you have to resort to supplements instead. And as seen with the latest carnivore diet fads, and even though it might be beneficial if people are like chronically inflamed, right? And they come from a background of eating, a lot of processed foods, and they never really follow the structured diet, and their digestion is completely messed up. I think it has its place, maybe 1 or 2 months, but then a little bit wider food selection needs to come into the picture, unless you really, like the carnivore diet. With the vertical diet, I feel that you're not really limiting anything. You're just providing options, right? That's why we have this verticality, where you can choose to supply the calories and the micronutrients. And so that's why it resonated with me more than most of the other diets, because you're not really excluding anything besides processed food, which is, not necessarily a bad thing. I think the most processed thing you have in your diet is chicken stock and beef stock, which I thought was a genius idea.
I guess it depends on whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight. If you're trying to gain weight, I might use more processed foods, more white rice, more orange juice. And if you're trying to lose weight, I'll use more high satiety foods. I'll use steak instead of ground beef. I'll use oranges instead of orange juice. I'll use potatoes instead of white rice. The foundation of that being potassium, and any calorie restriction, it's a little harder to get your micronutrients. And so I have to focus on those pretty heavily.
Right. So how many people did you get off blood pressure medications with this vertical diet? Because you focus so much on, you're focused so much on electrolytes. And I've always preached this for the last couple of years. Before you look at the Cialis and telmisartan and Bivolol and all these medications, lisinopril, why don't we address the micronutrients, right? The electrolytes, the magnesium, the potassium? And you see that so many people don't even need a blood pressure medication if they just focus on those little things.
Yeah.
And,
And it's important to say that, we work closely with their medical professionals and make sure that any adjustments to their medication is based on, their checkups and the fact that they've seen a significant decline in blood pressure, and that it's okay to start tapering down. But the biggies obviously are going to be weight loss and a CPAP for people with apnea. Those are huge. Hypothyroidism is another one, particularly with women, that'll affect blood pressure. And then after that, those 10-minute walks really help with postprandial glycemia, and that helps lower their insulin load, and that helps with blood pressure. And then beyond that, like you said, I'm really heavy on at least 4,500 plus milligrams of potassium a day, 1,000 milligrams of calcium, primarily or preferably from food, and then obviously the magnesium. Once you throw those three in, there might be some sodium restriction for those who are salt sensitive and hypertensive, but there's a small portion of the population that's also reverse salt sensitive. So you got to be careful when you make these recommendations that people are monitoring on a daily basis. Their blood pressure.
Right. And I think that your diet gives them the information to kind of monitor it themselves. And of course, when you come from an athlete background like you and me, and we've coached so many people over the years, you realize that 4,500 milligrams of potassium might not be enough, and 2,500 milligrams sodium might not be enough, because the athletes, in many cases, they require double, if not more. Because they train twice a day, they do cardio, posing practice, or crazy heavy lifts, and of course pharmacology that's involved, which alters your electrolyte balance quite a bit. So
and the salt stuff's been a challenge because the medical community, they tried to apply my recommendations for athletes to the general population, particularly the hypertensives. Most of the research done, probably all the research done with respect to the DASH diet, all of those people are hypertensive, and they're not normotensive individuals, and they're certainly not active athletes. Some of the research that I initially relied upon was from the World Heart Federation. That's Dr. Salim Youssef, who's a cardiologist, and they did the PEER study, which was one of the largest studies at the time. I still think it is ongoing, and a lot of the numbers came from that research. It has since been dispelled that there is a J-shaped curve across the population in terms of low sodium causing increased mortality risk. That having been said, we still do have a portion of the population that is reverse salt sensitive. But when it comes to normotensive individuals or athletes, then I rely on the work of Dr. Sandra Godek from the Heat Institute. She's a PhD in thermoregulation and hydration, and I was just on the phone with her last week trying to discuss the hydration protocols to disclose to these. I was doing a seminar down at Southern Methodist University, SMU, down there in Dallas, talking to their football team, and working again with the women's wrestling, and of course the UFC athletes that I've worked with John Jones and Henry Cejudo recently, and all those people need rehydration protocols, and it's based on their sweat rate. They lose at least 2 to 3 grams an hour of sodium. And then if they're salty sweaters, which is largely genetic, you can test that using a sweat patch that Dr. Godek provides through her Levelin site, levelin.com or levelin.org, I forget. But, we sweat tested a lot of the athletes so we could see exactly how much rehydration they needed and how much salt and carbohydrates to put per liter of water. It's very specifically designed for them.
Yeah. No, because these are super high-level athletes, right? And they usually got a whole team, including you, to help out. And I remember when I was still coaching quite a few athletes, mostly bodybuilders, but also, some Olympic sports, and helping with the drug tests and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You realize that there's so much variability, and that you really need to do the testing, the blood work, and like you said, the sweat testing and the urinalysis to see how much they lose there, to really customize it. And then you realize that all of these over-the-counter hydration formulas are not really cutting it. They're
no, and the big reason is that for pre and intra workout, you only want to be around 1% to 2% sodium solution. So for a liter of water, you probably only want 100 to 200 milligrams of sodium. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these, like an LMNT or it was 1,000 milligrams of sodium, you need to dilute it pretty substantially if it's going to be pre and intra. And a lot of the quote unquote rehydration drinks like Gatorade, etc., they're way too high in sugar. Yeah. And they have just the opposite effect. They
bring
signal
the kidneys out of the blood.
Then you're peeing all the time. And you can actually dehydrate yourself. So you don't want to drink back water. You want to drink back sweat. And the constitution of that pre and intra workout is going to be about a 1% to 2% sodium solution and about probably a 3% glucose solution. So maybe 30 grams of of carbs per liter, per 1,000 milligrams of water. And now post-workout is very different. Now, that's going to be based on how much water you lost during training, which isn't just water, of course. And then your salt sweat rate. So that might be a higher concentration. That might be more like a 5 to 10% solution of sodium, and a 5 to 9% solution of glucose to rehydrate, particularly if you're training twice that day. That's a very important time window of opportunity to rehydrate yourself before your workout 5-6 hours later. So there is some specificity to it. I don't mean to sound it overcomplicated, but in the book, of course, I break down those exact ratios and along with the products that we use to satisfy that.
Right. No, it is. And you see that a lot of people that really focus on their post-workout hydration, right, especially electrolyte intake, that the recovery is 10 times better. So a lot of the guys where you first introduced that, like, why don't we, besides the carbohydrates and the protein, the top level stuff that everybody's so eagerly after, that post-workout anabolic window, right? That's what everybody used to believe in. But if you supplement, with the proper electrolyte balance, then recovery is actually quite substantial, and they can go right back to work within 30 minutes instead of sitting there, mega fatigued for 2 hours, if not longer.
Yeah, and let's distinguish between the post-workout anabolic window in terms of protein consumption and the post-workout rehydration benefits of getting those carbs and sodium and water as soon as possible for the next workout. And even the post-workout anabolic window research, I think Schoenfeld was involved with that group, is my understanding. And I think the authors didn't say you shouldn't eat. They said you probably don't have to. But as you and I both know, nobody ever got big or strong not eating. And that, which is what troubled me so much about keto diets and intermittent fasting. It's like, how does that have anything to do with strength and performance, and anaerobic performance? That's my challenge with those. Now, for dieters, for somebody who's just, the average population is trying to lose weight, hey, if that helps you adhere, if that keeps you satiated, if it's the diet that seems the least restrictive to you that you can comply with, then, knock yourselves out. I would posit that there's a whole host of reasons why it's not optimal, because you and I both discussed earlier that we envision our clients to have an athlete inside, and we like to see them perform. I don't mean to get too far off track, but you and I both watched for years on social media lots of people dive into the keto and intermittent fasting camps, only to reemerge some years later when hypertrophy and strength became a priority. And we've seen that now. In the last year or two, primarily, you and I both have seen an extraordinary amount of focus on resistance training for even the average individual, for longevity, for not just lifespan, but health span. And the names are many, and they're very popular. Dr. Peter Attia being one on the forefront of that in terms of longevity. Remember, he was the keto king. He pissed on keto sticks for 3 years. He was the intermittent fasting king.
Most of these guys they were very fanatical, right?
Yeah.
And I still follow a ketogenic diet to this day, but I introduce a little bit of carbohydrates around the workout purely for performance, right? Not because otherwise performance is minimalized, and I still like to get a fucking solid workout in. But I mostly do ketogenic diet for the nootropic and then the cognitive benefits. So I don't have these blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day until I go do my workout, and then I can have a little bit of carbs and reglycogenate the muscle. But you see with a lot of these guys that were even more hyper focused on excluding all the carbohydrates, especially the carnivore guys. At one point, they got glucose intolerance, and they couldn't. Right, they were even intolerant to the glucose they produced in their liver, so they had to reintroduce a little bit of fruit or raw honey or whatever. Has to be animal product. So I think like the exclusion of one or multiple food sources, I think is a little bit extreme. And you see that the body starts to reject it after a year or two.
Yeah, as you said, it impairs performance for the specific intent. Mike Mutzel, I was on his podcast years ago. A lot of respect for him. MS, I think, in biochemistry. Smart guy, was keto for years and fasted for extended periods of time. Now, like you, he eats carbs around the workout window and gets sufficient sodium. Obviously, that's the second problem potentially with keto diets is the electrolyte depletion.
Yeah, oh, it's horrendous, especially if you train in hotter climates. So I've always supplemented with sodium royally to up to maybe 6 grams per day. That's sodium, not sodium chloride. That's actual
right.
sodium. But I live in
Awesome.
Thailand, right? Yeah, and it's a ton. It's a ton of sodium, but it really
Yeah.
helps with performance. And of course, if your sodium intake is that high, then your magnesium and potassium and calcium intake also needs a little bit higher to have that optimal balance between the different electrolytes. But again, that if you tell people that, like, you eat 6 grams of sodium, are you sure? How's your blood
Well,
pressure?
and that's not bad, because the average, if you look at the average worldwide, it's between about 3 and 5. I think if they wanted to put a single number on it, it would be 3.4 to 3.6, right in there. That's the average worldwide. Add a 1 hour of training, that's 2 milligrams or 2 grams of sodium. So now you're in your 5.5 to 7.
Right.
Based just on the fact that you're an active individual. And larger individuals need more. And I'll say one more thing. I'll say that the salt concentration matters more in terms of any potential deleterious effects on blood pressure or endothelial lining damage. If you're going to have 1,000 milligrams of salt in 9 ounces of water, it's going to be a very different response to your body than 1,000 milligrams of salt in a liter of water.
Right.
And so that the titration matters, the salt concentration matters. I was going to go on and just say there's a couple more folks. Paul Saladino, of course, was one who I was on his podcast years ago, was a devout keto carnivore, intermittent fasting guy. And the conversation that Damon and I had with him, and I think ultimately, subsequently, when performance became his priority, when getting stronger and better hypertrophy, he started incorporating fruits, raw honey, and calcium from dairy. That's another big one. I asked him years ago. It's been, I could pull up a DM to Paul probably 4+ years ago. And I said, Paul, how are you getting your calcium? And he mentioned you can get it from bone marrow. And I'm like, no. How are you getting 1,000 milligrams? Because I don't suspect that anybody's eating 1,000 milligrams of bone marrow a day. Supplementation.
No, it's tough. And liver has a decent amount of calcium, but how much liver can you eat before you get into this, vitaminosis, vitamin A, retinol state where it's just too much for your liver to handle.
Yeah. And of course, my proposal is going to be Greek yogurt. There's so many incredible benefits to that. It's tolerated better than regular milk in terms of its lactose content. It's got obviously we're seeing all the research now on fermented foods. The probiotic stuff has been there hasn't been a lot of really good definitive data that it kind of depends on which probiotic and under what circumstance.
Right.
So I mean, I hate to claim that has some magical benefit. I said that in one of my rants years ago when I talked about probiotics. But the fermented foods we see, and that was the Sonnenberg trials at Stanford when they did the fiber feeding studies and found that raising fiber it improved gut microbiome for a third, had no difference for a third, and actually was harmful for a third.
Which one are we going to choose to go with?
Yeah, but the fermented foods, the yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, those improved gut microbiome diversity and quantity across the board for everyone. So as long as it's good, well tolerated, that would include like a hard cheese, like a cheddar. So I'm a big fan of trying to throw yogurt into those diets.
Every day, man, post workout. I just had a bowl today. Yeah, fruit yogurt, and it sits very well in the stomach when you follow a ketogenic diet. And I have a decent amount of vegetables with each serving of protein just to make sure that everything passes through, because you can't just eat protein without any fiber. Because otherwise, you have a little bit of, backed up, or it doesn't digest well. You need to slow it down. Otherwise, you have too much gluconeogenesis from the protein that you eat. So it's, there's so many things you can play with when it comes to nutrition. And ultimately, I think if you find like something that really works, but not exclude anything, it's very sustainable. But of course, for performance, I would say, the best performance I ever had was when I was taking large amounts of carbohydrates, similarly to the vertical diet. Yeah, that's the
certainly
best strength.
Certainly around workouts, not only for its benefits during training, but also its anti-catabolic benefits immediately post window. And you have the stimulus of the muscle, so that those carbohydrates post-workout aren't going to spike your blood sugars as high, although that's still not a huge concern for normal individuals because that's expected.
That's actually what you want, to have a little bit of this, glucose and a micronutrient uptake from an insulin response. And of course, if you limit it to, simple carbohydrates like rice and easy to digest the other sources, then that's exactly what you need because this helps with the recovery process.
There is one, we talked about high blood pressure, and I think it's important because you and I have seen so many of our associates, friends, and the like, peers in the industry pass away over recent years. A lot of that has to do with high blood pressure. And I'll tell you, I've known personally a number of these names that people would recognize. I'm just not going to mention them, but obviously I've been around for 30 years. I've trained with a lot of these people. Blood pressure was very high on that list of causes, high blood pressure and its effects on kidney. How many people do we know that have had trouble with kidney failure?
More than the people that we actually know, because half of the guys that are having kidney issues currently, Dante Trudeau would know, because everybody goes to Dante when they have kidney issues. But half of the guys are not talking about it.
No, and that's very important. That'll kill you now, and it's immediate. Blood pressure is huge. So I'm glad we talked about it. A lot of those guys were in the off season. They were at a high weight, and they were not using a CPAP, which I just want to reiterate how critical that is to get a CPAP. I think secondarily to that, probably the biggest long-term concern. I mean, you might throw blood thickness in there, as a more important immediate concern in terms of hemoglobin, hematocrit, and RBC. But
especially if coronary artery issues, with plaque buildup and stuff, which is also very common in steroid users.
And I've got a chapter on that and being careful. I just recently I had a client trying to chase normal numbers who was on TRT and ended up giving himself getting low iron, giving himself anemia because he
overdonation. Yeah, I see
very
that
common because the general practitioner will look at his hematocrit and hemoglobin and won't look at his platelets or his ferritin levels, and that will get you into trouble. But let me bump on to the next thing that I think most people misunderstand about the vertical diet, and that's cholesterol, or more specifically, saturated fat. Now, what we know is that the cholesterol in the diet does not affect cholesterol in the bloodstream. For the vast majority of people, eating eggs does not increase to a significant degree LDL. No. But eating a lot of saturated fat will. Butter and bacon, ribeyes. And of course, associated with weight loss, you're going to see maybe an initial improvement in health markers. You might see some improvement in your lipids. But once the weight loss is stabilized and you keep downing your bulletproof coffees with your stick of butter, you're going to start to see that LDL climb.
right up, yeah.
And that is an independent risk factor. I mean, is your overall risk less because your triglycerides are normalized and your insulin sensitivity is improved and your blood pressure is down? Sure. But that will accumulate. It might just take longer to accumulate to the point where you might have an event. And I think from the get-go, people have always misinterpreted the vertical diet to be, just all red meat. And as we just discussed, it's a variety of protein sources. I've always recommended my macros to have fats less than 30% of total calories, and to be lean sources, 96.4 beef, top sirloin. You've heard me talk about that many, many times. And not a ton of butter. We've got, a little bit here and there, but, it's not something you want to prioritize. And so, managing LDL cholesterol, or as you know, ApoB ultimately is the more specific marker of protein that's on the LDL lipoprotein.
The lipoprotein little a marker is also very important to keep track of.
Yes, and that's more of a genetic predisposition that you can't really influence with diet. So managing ApoB and LDL is very important. And so I'm not a high saturated fat diet, never have been. And people who contact me and said, I've been using a vertical diet, my LDLs have skyrocketed. I find out they're eating a lot of butter and bacon and ribeyes.
Yeah, too much condiments, right?
Yeah.
Or what a lot of people don't understand now, like with semaglutide, liraglutide, dulaglutide, and tirzepatide, but now with time that these medications have come to market, right, these appetite suppressants, you see that there's a lot of changes in lipid levels. And I noticed that myself when I was experimenting with tirzepatide a while back to, suppress appetite and get some experience with this compound because it's getting more popular. you see that, without any lipid management in the picture, lipid levels start to skew. And that's
Yeah.
with a super healthy diet and a lifestyle of doing daily fasted cardio and, not eating so much dietary cholesterol. You just see that over time that it's so gradual, and you're wondering, like, why is this changing so much? So there's,
Yeah.
well, you never know what polypharmacy is involved. And of course, on TRT or more than that, I mean, it's very, very hard to manage your lipid levels.
Yeah.
Your diet is void of trans fats, which is already great. Maybe some of the butter might have slight trace amounts of trans fat depending on the butter source, unless you go with the real high-end butter. But I think, a little bit of saturated fat is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's found in most
under
animal meat
10%
sources.
of total calories.
Yeah, right. So it's under 10%, right? And then the other 20% can consist of, normal saturated or mono unsaturated or poly unsaturated fats and omegas. In that sense, omega-3s.
Yeah, even red meat is 50% monounsaturated fat.
Yeah. Right.
So, you're going to get a good balance. And then, of course, it's not all red meat. You're going to get that dairy in there. We know that dairy is cardioprotective. That even the saturated fat in dairy does not increase LDL. It's encased in that milk fat globulin membrane, and it does not increase LDL. Now, once you process and churn dairy into butter, you destroy that membrane, and of course, then it can affect LDL.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do a keto diet, then you just have to make sure the saturated fats are below 10%. And that's going to make you eating a ton more salmon, avocados, nuts, seeds, those kinds of things, if you can tolerate them.
Right. Yeah, I always usually did quite well, but the foundation was the animal meat sources, and then you supplement to get a decent amount of healthy fat in your diet with the seeds and the the nuts and the avocados and maybe some oils here and there if it's in combination with a salad, because I'm not really a big fan of dressing oils, whether that's olive oil or macadamia nut oil, because it digests so fast, right? It's a kick. Instead of having to break down this avocado or this piece of steak with a nice marbling around the edge, 5%, for example, this takes time to break down. Plus, it comes with nutrients, whatever is contained, fat-soluble vitamins, right? But there's almost no fat-soluble vitamins in these dressing oils. So I always kind of avoided it. Yeah.
And I found that if you're going to start increasing your oils, particularly your dressing oils, that you're going to have to you're going to have to do it slowly over time, because otherwise you're going to end up with soft stool. Because you just don't have, your body hasn't historically had to make that much bile and store that much bile. And so you're just not very good at breaking it down. So it ends up, in large intestine causing diarrhea or soft stool.
Yeah. Or inflammation, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then people start to supplement with ox bile and tatka just to get it in. And you turn into this roller coaster of poly supplementation, where you have a whole hand of supplements just to wash down your meal with. But the foundation, what I always mention, and what your diet is so good at, it's you assess your micronutrient requirement and intake first, and then you supplement on top. And it's the base of that is just to eat the healthy food that expires and that you have to prepare for yourself, or at least use a meal prep service to do that for you. And I think once you do that, let's say 5 meals per day, so that's 6.5 days a week, and you have 2 meals free, whatever you want, right? I mean, in Bangkok, Las Vegas, there are some nice restaurants around town, and you have 1 or 2 meals per week out there, and the rest you make yourself. I think it's a success story waiting to happen. I've been doing it for years like this, and I'm sure you do the same. Hey, I wanted to ask you about this blood work. I remember on one of these 10-minute walks of yours, you mentioned that you've done over 100 blood work checkups. Over the years, that you were an athlete, and just to get an insight into how your body was responding. And I realized I can never beat Stan in, the maximum total lifts. I'll never be an IFBB pro, but maybe with time, I can at least match you with blood work results. So I think I've done over 125 since 16 years old, right? Because I've been checking my blood work parameters since I was 16, because I wanted to know where my natural testosterone levels were at.
Yep.
And I think I'm up to 125, including some of the imaging, the ultrasounds and the cardiac scans and that kind of stuff. So where does this fascination of blood work come from? Because you were one of the first to really hammer it into the audience.
Well, really quickly, I was a skinny kid, 98-pound wrestling in high school, 106 as a junior, 115 as a senior, about 130 pounds as a freshman in college. And I started lifting weights, and 2 years later, I was only 158 pounds. I posted a picture of me at 21 years old yesterday on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
158 pounds. Well, I went to the doctor when I was 20 years old. My dad had taken me to the doctor in high school because I was undersized. I had delayed onset puberty, mostly as the result, as I've discussed, of the fact that I was working late. I was working a swing shift. I didn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning. This is a teenager in high school. And I would have to get up at 6 a.m. And so I was only sleeping 5 hours a night, and I was eating food at 7-Eleven, the nacho chips and the hot dogs. And I just wasn't getting sufficient calories, protein. I was drinking soda pops.
Sounds like a prime candidate for TRT. Like all the guys that were doing that right now, they're like, yeah, I got to get on some TRT. Just because the lifestyle is not very conducive for good testosterone levels.
Agreed. I mentioned in the post that when I was 20 years old, I finally went to the doctor. I was so frustrated for being so skinny after how hard I worked for so long. It's been 2 years training. I mean, it was brutal, carrying food around with me everywhere. And I was low T. I had varicocele, and varicocele in some percentage
in
of
the
the population. Yes, and it can cause low T and infertility in some individuals. Not all. I'm not suggesting that everybody who has varicocele has to run in and get TRT. I did get a lot of those DMs. You should get a blood test. You should get a blood test, but
exactly,
you can go in and get the what's it called, laparoscopic surgery. It's a pinhole. Right. It's a quick deal now, so you can get it repaired. I ultimately
did you have to get that done?
When I was in my early 30s, when I could afford it, it took me a long time to get in the position to where it was. Back then, you can imagine that surgery was pretty expensive. But I used the TRT, the HRT when I was 20. That's kind of what triggered the blood testing and my interest in finding out. I could have saved myself a lot of time. And I would say if I knew then what I know now, by addressing that sooner. And then, of course, throughout my career, I mentioned I didn't exactly stick precisely to the doctor's HRT protocol. And
you got TRT for two, probably.
That's right. If one is good, two is better. And so I started getting tested just to kind of see a bit of a hypochondriac. You're familiar with that. And so I just wanted to see how it was affecting my body. And especially when I came back into competing, and when I was in 2006, after a layoff in prior years, and I had the financial resources in which to do that more consistently. And I was competing in both bodybuilding and powerlifting back and forth. And I wanted to kind of see what my blood looked like at a heavyweight and a lightweight, a month before, the day after competition. And I just kept moving on with that. And then you get things like a CAC and a coronary angiography and a CIMT. And then you start
well, you get financially secure. You're like, okay, I've been postponing and, kind of doing this competition and reasonably hard dose just to get the job done. You're like, okay, I got to do a CAC score and, a Doppler and all that stuff just to make sure that it's a colonoscopy, just preventatively, right? It's not fun to talk about, but you just want to get it done just to make sure everything is functioning correctly. Yeah. And then you get a ton of data like that.
Yeah.
And I think once you got the data, once you got the data, you notice tiny things off, with financial security and the expertise that we now have after so many years of doing this, you can address it and fix it right away. And that's why you still look so vibrant, mid-50s. Right? And I really hope I can get up there.
I think another reason, in terms of lifestyle was I did have a CPAP since early 1990s, 1993. Yeah. I've always watched the blood pressure. I also, because, and this is strictly reflective, right? This is retrospect. I bulk up to compete in powerlifting. I'd be over 300 pounds at times, and then would diet down to single-digit body fat to compete in bodybuilding. Yeah. And so I was fixing a lot of the metabolic syndrome that I had succumbed to as a heavyweight every time I dieted down. And that's why I'm big on periodizing weight. Like with Hofthor, when I got him, he was 440. We brought him down to 395. We wanted to improve his metabolic syndrome. Right. And then when I took him back up, with less saturated fat, a CPAP, vitamin D, more monounsaturated fats, 10-minute walks after meals. And so I could put the weight back on him with less accumulation of liver fat. And we saw an improvement in his AST, ALT, and a host of other metabolic syndrome markers. But many times throughout my career, I just dirty bulked and I saw the results in the blood test.
Who has it?
But I knew it was temporary.
Yeah.
Now guys who stay heavy, powerlifters, strongmen, even linemen in the NFL football that I work with, they have to be more diligent about either losing a little weight in the off season or implementing all the other things I just mentioned. Choline, you said TUDCA, NAC, all strategies that we use, to help with long-term health. And so I was fortunate that I didn't expose myself to that for extended periods of times. I never used orals in the off season. I was really cautious with the liver. I always understood how critical it was for so many more things than what people presume. It was 400 functions in the body. The biggest reason for me at the time, the biggest reason for me at the time was simply appetite. If I started poisoning my liver with a bunch of orals, I couldn't eat. And you can't eat. You lose the size and strength.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So unless you eat, if you can eat, you probably also eat better because you can process it better.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think is the instances of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in like the powerlifting community or the larger bodybuilding?
Well, it's huge.
Yeah,
what's
over
interesting?
The years, I've seen it a lot.
Well, I was just listening to a podcast last night. Sometimes I get up at 4 a.m. and I feel compelled to listen to a podcast.
So there you go.
And it was Docs Who Lift. It was the Nadolsky brothers, Spencer Nadolsky and his brother Carl. Carl's an endocrinologist, Spencer's internal medicine with obesity specialist and lipidologist. And they have a podcast called Docs Who Lift. And they were specifically talking about metabolic syndrome the other day. And I've been, of course, my seminars have been talking about this for many, many years because I experienced it myself and I saw it in my athletes. But they were throwing some statistics out that they were very high, very high. And these are guys who work out. These are guys who train. And these were the NFL football player types, the linemen that are over 300 pounds, and of course the strongmen and powerlifters. I want to say the numbers were north of 80% had at least 2 of the 5 predictors of metabolic syndrome and fatty liver, some degree of fatty liver, which, and I would suggest that was pretty accurate, and more so than the general population who's obese. More so than the general population.
Athletes that eat a lot of food, and if you don't do a periodic diet at least once per year, where you really come down sub 8% body fat, or you have a real high metabolic rate, so you can get away with it. But like I suffered from it myself, and I have no idea how long my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was there. Probably like 2.5 years, because the previous diet that I did was tougher, and I didn't really get down to that gnarly condition because the workload was just too much. So I didn't really get down that far. And then, of course, you really need to crunch down to get the non-alcoholic fatty liver resolved. So I needed to come off completely, restore the hepatocytes by not having too much testosterone in the picture, and really recover the, the stem cells, which are present within the liver.
Yep.
And it took me like eight months to really get that resolved. And then when I went in for a fibro scan, they had to do it 10 times because they couldn't believe how good the results were. Like I had a liver, the health of like a 6-year-old. Like, this can't be right. Something is wrong with the machine. But it's because I literally lost all my size and I didn't eat. I did like fasting mimicking for 6 weeks just to really get it resolved. I lost all my gains. But
weight loss, about a 7% weight loss can resolve 95% of fatty liver. That's kind of the primary goal, is weight loss. And then there's some other things, like you mentioned, choline is a good one for helping with the liver repair, along with the supplements that you mentioned. As far as gaining weight, saturated fats seem to to amplify the amount of liver fat that's accumulated as you gain weight. And so that's a time at which I would try and really bottom those out. Just lower fats in general, for me, when people are trying to gain weight, and I push carbs, but I'm also trying to get them to increase their workload. I love daily doubles. That to me is optimal. Under an 800 gram of carb a day bulk, I'd like to see an AM PM workout with plenty of volume, plus the 10-minute walks after meals.
Yeah, that's where I grew the most when I was doing that in the off season. Of course, you limit your amount of fat intake during the day, and only healthy sources, a lot of omega-3s and poly monounsaturated fats, and the trans fat are non-existent, and the saturated are quite low. But you do 2 workouts per day, and some recovery aids to facilitate all the the anabolism. You go really, really far. You see that With the athletes that I helped in this sense, the liver values they stay sustained, even though you would think that liver enzymes would go up due to all this hypertrophy work, which can also give you a false positive for the liver enzymes, the transaminases, which are also found in skeletal muscle. But you see that's actually quite well sustained. I just think that at one point there's like a point of no return, and then liver health is a little bit impaired, and it doesn't really matter what you do to progress, strength-wise or size-wise. It just goes, downhill disproportionately for the amount of progress that you're making. And that's when you need to stay back. And most athletes are a little bit stubborn in a sense. They're like, yes, now I'm on track. I'm 2 increments away from my PR, right? Or I'm 5 pounds away of being a 4XL, 5XL shirt. And that's when you have to reel them back and say, listen, this off season is over. Because, the longer you continue, the more deleterious it is for your, liver health, which then cascades into everything else.
Yeah. Let me say one last thing about the blood testing. And again, this is the cost has always been prohibitive for most bodybuilders and powerlifters over the years. This was the great thing about connecting with Merrick Health. They did a fantastic job on driving that. And they hate when I say this because they don't make any money on the blood test I recommend. I used to spend well over $300, $350 for the same very comprehensive panel that I get that is now on their website for about $140. Mm-hmm. And that eliminates a barrier to entry, I think, for most people. And I don't suggest that people should have to get a blood test every month. You should get a baseline. Mm-hmm. And then those numbers that are, of concern, that are outside of the normal range that you want to, implement some protocol or remedy, those you can subsequently just test those. You don't need to go back and do a full panel.
Exactly.
You can go do $50 worth of testing and hit the 3 areas. You just get your ApoB, and a couple other, whether your TSH was elevated or if you had some high prolactin and you implemented some, whatever protocol you utilize to address them, you should test 30 or 60 days later to see that you're actually making progress on that. And then maybe, if you're on performance enhancing drugs, I got to think every 3 or 4 months you should probably get tested on an ongoing basis. You need it initially anyhow to correct the dosage and make sure that you're not getting too much aromatization or that you need anyhow, I think. And we try and remedy some of that with lower microdosed testosterone and using an ancillary that doesn't convert. That has kind of been our common recommendation, as opposed to taking a bunch of anti-estrogens, which can have a whole host of additional problems that you've covered at length.
Yeah. So what I think a lot of guys that are scared to do blood work is simply they don't want to know. Because they're doing something haphazardly and they bit into the trim bologna sandwich a little bit too long, so they don't want to know how bad it is. And then they use finances as an excuse. But in reality, if you spend a little bit less on drugs and more on blood work, you could break even cost effective wise, at the end of the month. If you, divert a little bit of this drug money into blood work money, you can actually get better results because now you're micromanaging your blood work better, right? You see it and you're like, okay, I need to make some adjustments. And because you're staying healthier, the results are better as well, right? You don't have to fight this uphill battle against inflammation and blood pressure and sleep apnea, which many guys have still, undiagnosed. So I think if you shove it in, and it's weird. Everybody understands that they need to bring in their car for testing just to make sure that the brakes and the fluids and all that stuff are functioning. To put oil on it. There's a little bit of stuff in the the windshield so it doesn't freeze if you're in a colder climate. And they understand that, but when it comes to the body, they have no clue or they don't want to know.
Let's just hit them with a couple of big ones here. And obviously, getting the blood test is a big one. Like you said, most people would just stick their head in the sand. I think people confuse side effects with effects. They really,
I'm swelling profusely. It must be working. Yeah.
I always find it kind of comical when a bodybuilder, the one on performance enhancing drugs, will scoff at the idea of taking a blood pressure medication or a cholesterol medication when they're shotgunning, something off the black market that is made in somebody's bathroom. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think you've talked about it, and I certainly do. If you need to get on some telmisartan to control your blood pressure while you're on this, when you're running that trend, then do it. And if you need a little bit of dual therapy, as Dr. Tom Dayspring talks about, a little rosuvastatin with some ezetimibe, low dose. Those two interventions can solve about 90% of the major health concerns that we're worried about with the bodybuilders.
Yeah.
That and the CPAP would probably be the other. You probably fix about 99% of your problems with
I think you
CPAP,
saved
some
like
telmisartan.
you saved 1 million lives right there. And then what I want to add is just to reduce the inflammation, which can come actually from the bathtub steroids, which are produced with synthetic carrier oils.
I see that a lot. I get people that send me their blood test and their CRP is through the roof. And I'm like, yeah, you're using non-filtered gear, and their white blood cell counts are high.
Yeah, horrendous.
And I'm like, you're using underground stuff, and it's not filtered. It's a pretty easy call. So
no, I know, and that's why I always preach pharmaceutical grade, or at least get it through a compounding pharmacy if you have it available to. And you might spend a little bit more, but again, if you're going to do this for years or decades, then in the beginning you might be able to get away with it. I certainly did. I've used underground lab stuff in the past. And you get a little bit of this test flu, which you think, it's because the testosterone dose is so high. No, it's the oil. Your body gets an adverse reaction from the stuff that you're injecting,
I don't know if you've ever talked about this before, but you can go on Amazon, not Amazon, but I think somewhere on the internet. It's been some years. Mm-hmm. You can find these little tiny filters. They're 22 UG filters that you can draw through.
Wattman filters, yeah.
Yeah, so you can draw your shot through a 22 UG filter into your syringe and then swap out the needle. Now you've pre-filtered the dose. Now the filters aren't cheap. They're like $5 or $6. And so it's going to add another $50, $60 to your bottle, depending on how much you take each shot. I'm just saying it was, 10 1 cc shots there. I'm going to use an example, but those are available. If you can't use if you're going to continue to use a source that you're not certain, those 22 UG filters are kind of a nice hack, as much as I hate to use the word.
It's probably like the gateway to, wait a minute, why am I getting this underground lab? I already have the filter here. Maybe I should, just start doing my own, which I'm not against at all. I would rather control the variables myself than leave it to somebody else, some random guy you met on the internet that takes Bitcoin as a payment.
And this isn't the unknown. Look, this isn't the unknown random guy. These are some top. I've worked. You and I both have worked with some of the top guys in the industry, and they're doing the same. They're making the same mistakes.
No, I know. So that's why I'd rather work with the guys that only sell pharmaceutical or from a compounding pharmacy. And Merrick Health under medical supervision can prescribe you all the testosterone you need to bring you to sustainable levels, right, from a health perspective. And then, of course, if you want something on top as an athlete, because you need, a certain amount to, bring that deadlift up or whatever your aspirations are, okay, then maybe you need to source your additional stuff somewhere else. But just be careful. People are very, very health conscious nowadays about, where they get their food from and their seed oils and, is it organic or not? And is it, sustainable? And you can apply the same to steroids and pharmaceuticals. It's a no-brainer to me. So I made the golden rule a couple of years ago. Said the only thing I put in my bodies are from products that are on the stock exchange. If it's not on the stock exchange, it's not a real company. Right? It's made by somebody else, and I don't want it. So that means you limit yourself from this, huge selection of drugs that are available. You limit yourself to maybe 5 or 6. And surprisingly, I got bigger and better and stronger and more healthy along the way.
Yeah, but you know how it is. Everybody thinks there's that special concoction.
I know. My whole YouTube channel is about special ingredients.
What was that? What was that one that the East Germans were using to beat the test? Turnaball. Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, I got to get Turnaball because these Germans." They were only using it because it beat the test for a while till they figured out it didn't beat the test. They used what you were using, except it was on the banned list, and they got caught. Right.
Same as the clear, the THC, the tetrahydro, the Balkans produced. Yeah, that was, and people nowadays are like, oh, it must be so good because Bob Sapp got huge and he was super strong. It's because the only thing he could use.
That's right.
That's a funny aspect. So talking about using stuff, when you were lifting those 200-pound dumbbells incline, I think you were the second human being on the planet who did it. Right? Ronnie was the first. He broke the world like, oh, apparently it's possible. And then I saw a video of you doing that. Would you be willing to dive into the pharmacology side of a 200-pound dumbbell press?
Well, I got to tell you, here's the interesting thing. Even back in the early 90s, when I was deadlifting almost 800, and I was benching almost 600, squatting 750, I was using 2 cc's of Sustanon a week. I can remember going from 1 cc to 2 cc's and thinking that I was going to shit a liver or something, horrible was going to happen. And it was interesting how 20 years later, I heard an interview with, who was it I heard an interview with that, former Mr. Olympia, was it,
Milosarchev or
it'll come to me. He was just talking about how he went from 1 cc to 2 cc's, and that was a really big deal back in the early 90s. That was like it was to me, being from Oregon. That's not exactly L.A. or New Jersey at the time. New Jersey was huge. They got some monsters coming out of New Jersey. It was always the
right.
Anyhow, and then you'd throw in, a D-ball, and usually the D-ball was 10 milligrams. Maybe if you took 2 of those, you were really killing it. So
times have changed.
Yeah, times have changed, but a couple cc's a test and 20 milligrams of D-ball probably gets you about as strong as you're going to get. Really, it's a lot of food involved with that. I couldn't afford, nor did I have HGH back in those early days in the 90s, but I don't think that does anything for strength. Maybe a little for water retention, certainly for
perhaps
tendons and ligaments. But I can remember. Here's a perfect example. When I did the World's Strongest Pro Bodybuilder in 2010, I think it was. 2009, I was training with Mark Bell and Flex Wheeler. In 2010, I upped my doses pretty high. I was doing 750 milligrams test, 750 EQ, 750 of Deca, Vanderlum.
Oh, wow.
And then I would throw in the D-ball the last 30 days. And the reason for that, I couldn't use it anymore, is because it would rob my appetite. It was really a struggle. Well, just before that World's Strongest Pro Bodybuilder, I also added, what was the name of that one? That was the one that the kids used to use. It was legal for
Superdrol.
Superdrol. Yeah.
Yes.
I use. See how long it's been? I've been out of
everybody right now is going straight to their source. Okay, so Stan Efferding, he won the strongest bodybuilder contest on Superdrol. I got to get me some of that.
Here's what I'm going to tell you about that, is that I wasn't any stronger at 305 pounds on the stage at the World's Strongest Pro Bodybuilder, wearing a single ply, barely deadlifted 800. Yeah. And I had pulled 8 1/4 before that at 275 with no suit on. And I wasn't any stronger, but my blood work was horrendous. Yeah. The Superdrol in particular, I think I even did a video. I think that was the Proving It DVD that company came and shot for me. And you could see I was a hot mess. One eye was like swollen shut. My head looked like a basketball. I was exhausted 23 hours a day. Yeah. The 1 hour I was in the gym, euphoria. I was incline pressing 500 for reps. I was banging out the 200-pound dumbbells for 1 hour. 30 minutes later, when I sat down and ate, I just felt like dog crap. I never felt so terrible. And again, the blood test the day after the Olympia showed my liver enzymes were about 4 times normal. That was the worst they ever got. Yeah, 10 times normal is hepatitis. For Christ's sake.
No, if you're in the 900,000 range, then you're got hepatitis. But if you're like 300, 400, that's a very common occurrence with Superdrol. People don't understand, But Superdrol and halo testing, of course, what the bodybuilders use pre-contest, that supposedly makes you super hard, unless only if you're really, really shredded.
I'll let you in on a little secret. We'll let you in on a little secret for the 200-pound dumbbells. It's kind of a circus sideshow trick. Right. Those dumbbells are so long that if you bring them up and you angle them slightly, they'll hit your chest, and your elbow isn't anywhere near parallel. Right?
You get sumo.
So you're kind of doing 3/4 reps, right?
Right.
Banging them into your chest.
Sumo incline chest press.
You got to tilt them. Now, when I trained with Flex Wheeler in 2009, And just as a side note, he had me using, less than half of what I anticipated.
Yeah, but he made you do like 20 reps on everything, I remember.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say in terms of the performance-enhancing drug protocol.
Okay, right.
I talked about this years ago. I think it was on a podcast with the Mind Pump folks. And I said that it was 100 milligrams of test propionate every other day, 100 milligrams of Masteron every other day, 37.5. Back then, the trend was 75 milligram, right?
Yeah, the parabolinams. Yeah.
Yeah, the parabolinams. So it was 37.5 every other day. I think the Anavar, no, it wasn't Anavar. It was Winstrol at 50 a day, and GH was I think it was 2 IUs a day. That was it. That was the whole cycle. And I know it probably sounds like a lot to some people, but for those of us in the know,
it sounds like Monday to some guys.
Yeah, it's pretty skinny. But here's the thing about Flex is he did have me eating 6 to 7 meals a day. I had well over 3 pounds, sometimes 4 pounds of top sirloin steak a day, 600 plus grams of carbs at least, white rice, potatoes primarily. But he wouldn't let me do powerlifting. He wouldn't let me do a single squat, bench, or deadlift for nearly 6 months before I got my pro card. The muscles that I was developing for powerlifting, they weren't, I would say they weren't weak points. My glutes, my spinal erectors,
Yeah, it had to come up. That it had to change. Your proportions were, of course, made for strength, and you need a little bit more sweep and a little bit more flow to your physique, because you had a very dominating physique. But for bodybuilding, they need a little bit of balance. That's why you probably went with Flex Wheeler.
Yeah, more range of motion, like you said, higher volume, much greater range of motion. And then he has that old Charles Glass influence where he really tries to exploit each muscle and isolate each muscle by manipulating your body such that you can't recruit, multiple muscles to do multi-joint movements. So even like on chest, I never went over 100-pound dumbbells training with Flex, and my chest got way bigger and fuller than it ever did doing 200-pound dumbbell presses. Way bigger. It was the fullest and biggest it ever was from training with him. Because he would have me arch, sternum up. I couldn't get my shoulders into the movement. I had to get my elbows really deep. I had to slow down. Right. He had me slow down the
positions,
eccentric.
Right? Yeah.
Instead of bouncing it, he had me slow down the eccentric for a 3 count. He was doing all the bodybuilding stuff, and it worked across the board. Even my legs, which have always struggled, they were the biggest thing.
This came up quite a bit, and especially when you did your first pro show, I think they were even better. And when you did your got your pro card.
Yeah, and that's from that. A lot of people say, how did you bodybuild and powerlift at the same time? And the answer is I didn't. When I was good at powerlifting, when I was good at bodybuilding, I was just doing one or the other, and they were very different.
Yeah, because I remember you did that strongest bodybuilder competition with Johnny Jackson, but your totals weren't as high as where they were before. And I think Johnny Jackson has a powerlifting background as well. Yeah. He went back to powerlifting at one point, and you went back to powerlifting after that. And I think that's after the strongest bodybuilder competition, you did your maxes, right? All-time best. Is that correct?
Yes. I beat my all-time world record after the world's strongest pro bodybuilder. Yeah. At a lighter weight, I was 275. At the world's strongest pro bodybuilder, I was 305. And so about all I got out of that extra 30 pounds was some really bad blood work.
Beautiful. Yeah, so, that's what Jay Cutler always said. They were all better a little bit lighter. I mean, I noticed it myself now that I slimmed down quite a bit. Of course, eventually I'll get back into the game. I try to get my wife pregnant first. So that comes with a whole list of, prerequisites of things you can't do. So once that's out the door, hopefully, fingers crossed, by August, September time, then I'll come back into the more stronger and more exciting part of the sport. But until then, I'm just abstaining from everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I had kind of spoken before about some of the topics we wanted to discuss, and one of them was my business success. I built 5 multi-million-dollar companies in the last 17 years. How did you do both? And the answer is I didn't. I think you can be great at anything, but you can't be great at everything. And when you're trying to do too many things at once is when you don't do as well at any of them. And I stopped competing in 1997 came back in 2006. That nearly 10-year period is when I built.
Yeah.
That's when I was building my companies. And a short period there, for almost 2 years, I didn't even go to the gym. I dropped down to 210 pounds. I talked about that in my video, Stress for Success, on how horrible I felt and how my health has suffered from the stress of the job and working, 16 plus hours a day, 7 days a week. But the point being is that in 2006, when I came back to compete, I had the financial freedom and time to commit myself to that. And in 08 and 09, when I was flying to train with Flex Wheeler and Mark Bell, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a job, I was able to devote anything I wanted into it. And I talked about the expense associated with that too. In one of my YouTube videos, I talked about the fact that I would spend, the vast majority of it was the fact that I had hired Flex Wheeler. I was living in an extended stay or one of those, those places with a kitchenette
in Venice,
across from the gym.
Which is very, very expensive.
Yeah, for 3 months straight. And I was eating nearly 4 pounds of top sirloin steak a day from Costco.
That's grand upon grand per week.
Yeah, it probably had to exceed 20 grand a month. Yeah. And people think that might be a huge cycle, but to be honest with you, the gear is pretty affordable in comparison.
Especially if you go to Venice and you're in the inn, and you're in the inn. Most of those guys will probably hand it to you.
A bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
Staying in that hotel was $200 a night.
Yeah, no, I know that's where the real expenses come. And then the food and the coaching and the personal training regarding the posing.
Less than $5,000 a month.
Yeah. They're not cheap. Yeah, especially in-person coaching, it costs quite a bit.
Yep.
Did you charge him back when you were helping him for the comeback? Like, so
no.
You want me to help you back since that's $5,000 a month?
No.
Build up a good relationship, in that time.
Indeed, yeah. He just lives right down the street from me, so we get together.
Oh, okay, that's good.
He's here in Vegas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I hope he's doing well because he had so many setbacks the last couple of years. It's so unfortunate.
Yeah, his health has been challenging. We just worked out about a week ago, so he's still in and out of the gym. The problem is with his immune system, the way it is when he gets hit with a bug, he might end up, having to go back to the doctor for a few weeks or a month, and he'll lose 10, 15 pounds and then have to gain it back. And it's just been a revolving door for him like that. But he's been really positive. He's pretty good. He's been through a lot, but he's pretty good. He's smiling.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, and you still see him regularly?
Yep, saw him last week.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to hear. So, when it comes to like being an athlete versus being a businessman, what do you think is more demanding? Because, I kind of unwind to be like a recreational bodybuilder that took it very, very serious, but not to the point I wanted to compete because I never thought I had the physique to compete. And now I'm really more focused on, business, and I had to dial back the bodybuilding, but I still can't give it up myself 100%. I will never go through a 10-year period where I only focus on business, because, I feel that it should stay part of a staple of my life because I've, been doing it since I was 15 years old. But do you think, because like a guy like Star Wars Theory, I think you've had a consultation with him, Niatus. I recently had him on the podcast, and he was very adamant into powerlifting and strongman stuff. And then his YouTube channel took off. He's got like 3.3 million followers right now, and he took like a couple of years break. And you see that his success just climbed astronomically. Now he's training with Ron Partlow over there in Canada, and he's slowly getting back into it, but he's just trying to maintain. Like, what kind of advice would you give after having accomplished both, like the highest level of competition and also being very successful in business? Like, where is there a balance, or do you just have to sacrifice one of them?
I kind of go back to you can be great at anything, but you can't be great at everything. I think you're going to have to be pretty focused on one or the other because they're both extraordinarily demanding. Bodybuilding is a very selfish sport, but running a business is very selfish as well. I mean, your family, there's sacrifices that you make during the amount of time that you can spend with your wife and kids. The most successful, the hyper successful individuals, they're working, a lot of hours, and it can be stressful. I would say the same behaviors that make you successful as an athlete, your consistency, your time management, your discipline, those kinds of things, repeating successful things day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, decade in, decade out. Repeating those behaviors is what it comes down to. It's just the easy thing about bodybuilding in that regard is you kind of know what you need to do, and it's so immediate and measurable. If you go to the gym and your performance isn't what it was 3 days ago, then you know it's something that happened over the last 72 hours, for the most part. Unless you've been overreaching consistently for some time. It's a short night of sleep. It's a missed meal. It's a lack of hydration. It's overreaching in a particular workout that you didn't recover from. It's the feedback's immediate. You can usually quantify it, record it, and you have some pretty good metrics to work off of as you progress. Everything should be measurable and progressible. The challenge with business is that it's more mental than physical. The bodybuilding and powerlifting, there's only so much. You have limited physical capital. There's only so much you can invest before you realize you've overtrained, and you can't just work harder and harder and harder in the gym.
You'll tear yourself apart. You get injured, and you have setbacks. So people are understand. But with business, you can just keep grinding, and then suddenly
that's
5 years have gone by.
Now, whether or not that's wise, to keep grinding, or whether or not that's effective, it's harder to measure because sometimes the feedback isn't immediate. Sometimes things that you're doing now can take weeks, months, or even years to come back, and you're not sure if the investment that you're making is going to give you a return of time, or whatever marketing that you're doing, or whatever avenue you're pursuing, whatever goods or services that you're trying to promote. You don't know which ones are gonna be successful or not.
No, I know. Trust me. Yeah, I've been there.
And it's a real challenge.
You just keep trying, right, until something sticks. Sometimes it's with business like that. You have faith in the product or the service, but man, the amount of services and products that I discontinued because they were not worth, or some of the other products or services, they exceeded far beyond what I was expecting. Then you focus your effort there, and some of the other things you just have to let go because it doesn't make sense anymore. That's why I let go of coaching completely now, besides a couple clients that I still have, but just time management wise, it didn't make sense to me anymore, because I do so many consultations and affiliate sales and that kind of stuff. So but I do agree. Like sometimes it takes months before the payoff is there, or years, but the best advice I got a couple of years ago was actually from you, which was as follows: you should just give everything away for free, Steve. And it paid off so much. So much. And I remember I told you that in Las Vegas. We talked maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we talked about eBooks, you had the vertical diet, and I was writing a couple of eBooks. And he said, just, keep producing content. And that's exactly what I did. And people always say, Steve, I can't believe this information is free because all the other coaches are charging for it. And even then, they're not that in depth, with what they present. And I just keep producing it, and it all comes back. So people always wonder how I make money when I give the stuff away for free, but it's, personalized advice and affiliate sales, because people are thankful, like, hey, wait a minute, Steve gives away so much information. Let me use his discount code. And of course, that all compounds at the end of the month. And then it's, and then it pays off. But it's not like it came overnight.
No, it doesn't.
It took a couple of years before I got to this point, and I've had so many roadblocks along the way. It's being self-employed or being a businessman is very time consuming. I think people don't understand it.
Yeah, and I think I might have mentioned at the time that even my wife, when I did the Iceland seminar, I spent 2 hours going over every aspect of my diet, or a good portion of it. Obviously, now it's the vertical diet ebook is so large that you can't cover it all in a one seminar. But she's like, you just gave them all the information for free. Who's going to buy your book? And the book actually sold. It went crazy after that. I sold a lot of books as a result. And it's for the same reason that you just mentioned. One, because people appreciate the information, but two, you can't remember it all, and you want to have something that's organized for you. We set things up kind of in a hierarchy of most important to least important, and give people checklists, and so they can go to a particular topic and they can make sure that they're addressing the big rocks. And we have links to resources, as you mentioned, whether it be a particular supplement or even in my case, I have a reseller for CPAPs here in the States that if people can't find his CPAP.
That's good.
I've tried to make relationships and connections that allowed people. I hate, telling somebody, hey, you should do this, and then not helping them find the resources that makes that easy for them.
Well, you put it all together, and that's why people appreciate a resource like yours or mine, because it's all pre-digested and usable right away. Right? You watch the video, you read the ebook, you can get started right away.
You can get started right away.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
especially
what's important.
In your case, because you have the vertical diet also, you have that meal prep service attached to it. So, some people wouldn't even have to think. They read the ebook and like, yeah, okay, makes sense. And then they can get started basically a couple of days within the first delivery. So that makes it even super convenient.
Yeah, for sure. And some people might consider that a conflict of interest. I certainly don't. I use it myself. It's convenient. It tastes good. Mm-hmm. I make my own Monster Mash. But the meal prep provider that I use makes it better. And so
yeah. Plus, like if you're a busy guy, and everybody's busy nowadays, that's why my long form videos don't do well. So don't say that you're not busy, people. Please, people have limited time, so they watch shorter videos, but they also don't want to meal prep. And the reason why I still meal prep myself is because this is Thailand. Meal prep services here are a little bit, the good ones are very, very far away. So by the time the food arrives here, it's no longer good. And I use it as micro breaks, to keep my productivity up. So I cook all my meals fresh. And that way I get like a 10, 15-minute break. I get on my feet, do a little bit of walking around. It's not exactly a 10-minute walk from the kitchen to the fridge, but at least I get mobile because I'm literally at this position the entire day, just making sure that, the entire business is rolling. Because otherwise, the next day will be double work. So, you kind of set your schedule that way. Are you slowly unwinding now from the business, or are you still there's so much demand and you're always, working, or have you toned it down a bit over the last couple of years?
There's no such thing as unwinding. I've got other products and services. Ben Pollock moved to town, IFBB Pro, World Record Powerlifter, PhD. And we got together and started the Biggs University to go into some of the underground stuff together. And we host a seminar. I bring people into my home and I show them, how I prep, and we talk through, a lot of different curriculum items here at the house.
That's cool.
And then we go to the gym for the second half of the day, and I walk them through the kind of training that they should do based on kind of their individual goals. But that's one. And then I've been writing Vertical Kids. Kids. I say from conception to college is what I say.
Oh, that's a very long plan. That's a 1,000-page ebook, or what?
Yep. As a parent, raising children, and I get lots of questions from parents about their children, and parents really want the most for their kids. I try and set up the kinds of things that they should be paying attention to as children progress through, adolescence to puberty and beyond into high school and collegiate sports. And so I'm putting that together because I work with a lot of kids. And those are the big projects. Other than that, we're still expanding the meal prep company.
Okay, wow. That's all under the vertical umbrella, basically, that you're still expanding and working with athletes of all ages. And if you're continuously like with this vertical stuff, like how are you doing that with the kids? Are you teaching them how to eat or how to get into fitness?
Everything from diet to diet compliance and actually helping them understand. It's educational for the kids. I put it in such a fashion that they can read it and understand it. I think that they have to buy into it and they have to understand it. They're not going to comply. And then, how you execute that. I've been focused so much on, 1% information and 99% execution now. That just get, how it is for your parents. It's hard to get compliance. It's hard to be consistent. And so that's what I focus on now is how to make that a little easier for the parents and the kids to be able to do these things, kind of consistently is what's most important.
Yeah.
And so we focus on that and the training as well. I have the Vertical Kids Power Hour here every Sunday at Sin City Iron, the gym I own in Las Vegas. Yeah. And we teach little kids from kindergarten to college. We have teenagers. We have 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds in here learning to squat, bench, and deadlift, and we take them through workouts. And so that's part of it as well. I bring my kids with me when I train sometimes. And I've taught them enough to where they can go over and bench, and they can go over and squat, and they can go over and deadlift without me. I help set them up, and they do it without me.
How old are your kids now? What about
9 and 11.
Ages? Oh, okay. So you got them late also, huh? So I don't
Yeah.
feel too left out.
No, I'm 55 now. I started late.
Yeah. So I'm turning 40 this year. My wife just turned 40 last week actually.
Yeah.
She got the big 40 before me. I don't date younger girls. I can't. I don't have time. I don't have time. I need a mature woman in my life.
That's right.
So yeah, right. So yeah, we'll probably be in our 40s by the time we have our first kid, and then second one will be a couple of years down the line. That's funny. Like a lot of people in my immediate family said, don't wait too long, because when you get older, it's going to be more difficult. And a guy like you, a guy like me, we always focus on our health and put that first and foremost. And then I do all the semen analysis now and just make sure that my fertility parameters are coming back nicely. And my wife is doing the same. And I think, for the people that are really invested into their health and have, again, the financial means to make sure they can do all the health checks along the way, I don't think it's an issue to have a baby after 40 years old. Plus, you don't act like the typical 55-year-old. You more act like a much younger version, than most guys, just energy-wise and vibrancy-wise. And I think that brings us closer to the kids as well, because, I've seen so many people my age or people your age that are not part of the fitness industry, don't track their health parameters, and they're really, really old. They're really old.
I think the biggest benefit for me is that I'm not so focused on me. I've already done all the things that I wanted to do and achieved whatever goals I had. And, of course, financially speaking, I'm in a good position now that I haven't always been in. And so it allows me more time with the kids, and I'm more calm. I find that I don't get too worked up very often. And kids, they can screw up a lot repeatedly and it can get frustrating. But I just find that I can shrug my shoulders and laugh about it and teach lessons. But the big thing is I get to spend a lot of time with them. I wake them up in the morning and make them breakfast. I can take them to school. I pick them up from school. We go to the park. There's a lot of things I can do. I still travel a decent amount. I'll try and fly out as late as I can on Friday and come home as early as I can on Sunday morning if I don't make it home late Saturday night. And so I've missed a few weekends here and there. But other than that, I'm a lot more present than a lot of parents. So
yeah, the most
happy about that.
Do you think that's because like you started to have kids when you felt like absolutely financially secure to understand that by the time you had kids you wanted to spend the time with them? Because that's mostly been our dilemma over the last couple of years. Like we were both ready mentally to have kids, maybe 5-7 years ago when we got into a relationship, but I always wanted to wait until I was of certain financial security that when I do have kids, I can just unwind and take like 4 or 5 extra hours out of the day just to spend with my kids, doing the diaper stuff and the breakfast, like you said, and playing and helping with homework and all these little things that you need to do as a parent to, raise a solid next generation of your own, last name. I think a lot of people, they have kids too early and then, they're not in this financial position yet where they can take a step back or they're employed. And then it makes it even harder because you're gone most of the day, and by the time you come back home, then you're really, really tired. Do you think that helps?
I wouldn't want to suggest that it was mostly financial. Money is obviously very important, but the time component is what's key. My pops worked from dark to dark. He was out of the house before I went to school in the morning, and he didn't get back till 7-8 o'clock at night, and we saw him for 3 hours in the evening. He was home on the weekends for sure, but I just feel as though I'm more present, particularly during these important years. Now, when my kids in high school probably won't even know I exist, and certainly when they get to college, they're not going to want me hanging around. But I'm not going to miss these important times, and that isn't just all play. It's important times to help discipline and teach your kids self-respect and self-worth, and get them participating in things that'll habits that they'll help them for the rest of their lives, and just be able to go out and exercise with them and to take them to, and be able to sit down and help them with their homework, things that I think are going to be long remembered and long benefited.
I'm sure, right? Because like you just mentioned it maybe a little bit different situation with your parents, as did I. So, it sounds like you wanted to do a little bit of a do-over, right? Yourself with your generation. That's how I always felt like, okay, my childhood was maybe not the best, but then when it's time to do a childhood of my kids, I can kind of redo it, but also relive that in a different perspective. So that's why I always wanted to wait. And again, people in the fitness community, there's so much of a younger mindset, more mature in certain things, right? When it comes to health, but more energetic and more lively. So I don't feel that age gap of 40 or 45 years old between your kids and yourself is that detrimental compared to, general population, where you really see an age gap and they don't understand. Because we're in the gym all the time. We still see these teenagers and 15 years olds, right? Just doing their thing. So and through social media, we're in touch with every age group nowadays. So you feel that you're a little bit more into it compared to everybody else.
Yeah, great point. I think the fact that I'm very active and very athletic, maybe I can't go and play soccer the way I used to when I was 130 pounds, but I'm fit. We can do other things together. That's the neat thing. Is I can involve my kids in athletic things, and I can participate in the majority of those. So that's a big deal, and that's the fountain of youth. I'll be training forever. This is for me. I don't aspire to be anything I was. I look up to people like Robbie Robinson. Folks that are in their 70s still crushing weights. I like that. I go to the gym and I see just random guys that are in their late 70s or early 80s who have been lifting all their life, and they're stout. They're not hunched over. They got a solid handshake. They're
sharp, right? They're very acute. Yeah,
those are the guys that inspire me more than anything. Is the fact that you can see your way over the horizon to be able to still, manage to be strong and fit enough to have a good health span.
Exactly, yeah. And so what I realize now, that guys like Michael Hearn, they're getting older now, right? They're also in their mid-50s. Yeah. And he recently had a kid, and whatever he does in his private time and not talks about, that's up to him. Right? That's always up to debate. And I'm sure the comment section is going to go wild right now with some memes. But like when you see the guy getting into his 50s and he has a kid and he's just super energetic and he still looks healthier than most guys in his age.
Exactly.
You can't hate on him too hard, I mean, I think it's very inspiring. That he's still kicking ass, and he's that strong. I mean, whatever he does, he's that strong. It doesn't come for free, That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and I agree. And that's what we're seeing again back to kind of the longevity industry. When you look at the Peter Attias of the world, guys like that, he was an ultra endurance guy, and now he's just totally focused on strength, and not so much so. And I don't want to open up any cans of worms here, but when you look at, say, a David Sinclair or Walter Longo, you don't get the same sense. They're not invested into the strength
I agree.
part of this deal. They're looking at what supplements can they take and how much can they starve themselves to live longer. I don't think that's ultimately the best way to have a long health span. And so
you gotta put your body to work. You got all these the mitochondria are producing energy for a reason,
Yeah.
And it's like which other animal is sedentary? Sloth. They move very, very slow, but a sloth doesn't accomplish much in their lives either. So for every other animal that lives reasonably long, dolphins and whales and those kind of, or tortoises, they move around and they're quite active and they do stuff. And I think it's the foundation of youth. Even that Bryan Johnson guy, not the Liver King Bryan Johnson, but the anti-aging Bryan Johnson with a Y.
Right.
He's still putting in the hours. His stack is extensive, though. I'm going to review it soon. The blueprint. Have you ever looked into this guy?
I haven't seen his stack.
Okay, I'll post a video about it. So he does blood work and organ imaging, and he does calisthenics, and he's got a home gym. He's a retired multimillionaire. I think he sold this company when he was like mid-30s for $800 million.
Wow.
And ever since then, he's been trying to rewind the clock because he was in an unhealthy state. He got fat and unhealthy and oxidative stress and that kind of stuff. So he's trying to rewind the clock, and he's doing, he's got all the financial means to do it. So he's trying to optimize every angle, and I think it's super fascinating. And he documents everything online, just publicly, like the metformin and the Archibos and the vegan diet and the testosterone patches.
Let me touch on that a little bit too, since we talked about all the old competitive days, and I'm talking about the blood tests. And I'm 55 now. I still maintain a high level of fitness and strength, but I found that I always say it's twice as hard to gain, half as hard to maintain.
Yeah.
And these days, I kind of compete with myself to see how little I need to do. To be honest with you, I only have to lift reasonably heavy, much less often, and I do a lot more.
Reasonably heavy. 5
I don't
plates.
do that very often.
What are your good mornings? Sometimes I see you do.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the hell?
But the trick there is it's all concentric. I deload the eccentric by dropping it into the racks. The same with the box squat. It's all concentric. But more importantly is the stuff I do in between that I don't really videotape. Is that I'll do a lot of, I'll do the bike, and I'll do concentric work. And you've seen me run stairs for years. I've always liked the concentric portion of that rather than the eccentric braking force of running. I always thought that would accumulate too much fatigue for me to recover from the workouts. It would just add too much into the total bucket of fatigue. And I'm also doing a lot of like sled drags and things like that. Just a lot of the stuff that Louis Simmons did kind of, throughout his career. Just he was constantly moving.
It's still challenging stuff, and it's, sled,
a lot of low fatigue stuff like chest supported rows and lat pull downs instead of bent over rows, and just less stress on the lumbar. I don't deadlift that heavy that often. I was only pulling heavy once a month. And in between that time, I was using, box
didn't you do
squats.
like 6-plate deadlift recently?
Yeah, something like that. But again, the frequency and the volume matter. The intensity is certainly there occasionally, but you can recover from it if you prepare for it properly. And then aside from that, of course, I've always ate the way I've eaten, slept the way I've slept. That's just kind of a habit for me now, is to be very disciplined in that regard. And then as for the performance enhancing drugs, I found I can never touch any orals anymore. Occasionally, if I get swirly, I can maybe do a 10 milligram Anavar under the tongue, sublingual, just so I don't see any AST, ALT effects. But it would just be for a brief period of time if I was trying to do something. And then I can get away these days with about 50 milligrams of test every other day. And that'll keep my testosterone. If I test my testosterone levels the day after a shot, they'll be north of 1,300, 1,400 sometimes, maybe 17, just from 50 milligrams every other day. If I wait 3 days, then I'm down around 900, just before the blood test. And aside from that, I don't use GH. It's always caused insulin resistance for me, and so I've avoided it. I don't really have any problems with IGF-1. I get my blood tested, so I don't feel like there's a deficiency there necessarily. I didn't like using Sermorelin and Ipamorelin either. I sampled that, and I just didn't see the benefit, particularly the cost associated with it. And I just, again, my mindset is what's the least that I could use and still get a significant benefit from. And over the years since I've retired more than 10 years ago, I've tried little shorter cycles where I might throw in some Masteron or increase the Anavar. And I didn't see a significant increase, at that level. I would think you would probably need to use significantly more and more calories, in order for me to perform anywhere near the level of competition. But I don't think
do you want that at this point? Because
I don't.
If you go up, like I'm always conflicted with this as well. I've had my time where I was just a beast, walking around like an absolute tank and just destroying all the weights and destroying my mood in the process. And now looking back on it, it was like for that 1.5 hours that you're in the gym, you're an absolute god. It's the best 1.5 hours out of the day, and then the rest you're kind of impaired, but also emotionally and productivity wise. You're a little bit agitated, whether that's from the drugs or just this chronic fight or flight state that you're in. And now I realize, I can actually maintain quite a bit on HCG, no less. HCG and recombinant follicle stimulating hormone.
Yep.
And will I go back on TRT? Of course, because it's cheaper and my blood levels will be a little bit higher because now I'm about 600, 800, depending on when I test. So it's not optimal, but I'm still sustaining my strength, decent amount, and my physique. Okay, I did lose 40 pounds, but it's the 40 pounds that was probably not good for my health anyway. So in that sense, it's quite surprising.
As did I. I did the same thing. I dropped about 40, 50 pounds after I stopped competing. That put the biggest dent in my strength. I mean, bench press in particular goes up and down with body weight. And so when I came from 285 to 240, or at one point I was down to 235, I kind of hang out. I've been between 235 and 240, 242 for 10 years.
Right.
So, I just don't have any aspirations to be any bigger. And matter of fact, I was more recently thinking about dieting down to 220 just to see how it felt. you know.
I feel good now at 200. It's
Yeah,
very small, but I'm lean. I have a six pack and some lines in my glutes and good separation everywhere. So in that sense, it's actually very comfortable. And you notice that sleep quality improves, energy levels, like I can do more stuff, I can walk stairs if I wanted to for hours, like climb
yeah.
mountains. And it's such a huge difference, but yeah, on the other side, that 1 hour in the gym, you miss it a little bit,
Yeah,
I
a
will
little
say
bit.
that.
But I agree with you. I think more energy is one thing, although I don't feel incredibly, I don't feel tired.
Mhm.
But again, I think a lot of that was from DOMs, from the heavy sessions that I used to do more
Yeah.
often.
Mhm.
Now I only train every other day. I'll do lower body day off, upper body day off. And
Yeah.
again, I do a lot of the exercises that don't involve a lot of pain, although 2 days ago, my training partner made me walk 200 yards of walking lunges.
I saw that.
Yeah, and I don't do lunges that often, and so of course it's a novel stimulus, and my legs
Yeah.
and ass are just totally torn apart now.
Jelly. Yeah.
But other than that, occasionally I'll do some stupid shit, but again,
and
novel
this,
stimulus.
and this was what, and now it's like high summer, right, in Vegas. So
Yeah, it's not bad. We're not over 100 yet. This is still We're still low 90s, so that's pretty good.
If I do it here, with the humidity, I would die doing that much lunges. It's that bad right now.
It's not bad here. I can't do humidity, that's for sure. Okay. But I guess the biggest reason I would think to drop the weight, like you mentioned, you probably have a lot more energy. I mean, probably have a 40-pound meat sack on me, and I'm lean. I mean, I've got a six pack. I'm lean. I got veins in my abs, and I've always been lean. That's not a problem for me. I had a hard time gaining weight, not losing weight. So I can't be over 10% body fat. I probably haven't been in 10 years. And so it's really not any of that. It's just the fact that I do carry around a lot of heavy weight, and I'm not a big guy. I mean, I know it's hard to hear coming from me, but when you see that picture of me at 21 years old at 158 pounds, you realize
come a long way.
And my pops played tennis in college weighing 155. I'm not a big guy necessarily. I carry a lot of muscle, and it's not hard for me. My training protocol is pretty sustainable, and I've gotten so good at the eating, even when I travel. Prepping meals, packing meals, whatever. As long as I eat enough, and I have set up the meals in such a way that it's easy to consume, I still have to take in over 4,500 calories a day, or I'll lose weight.
Oh wow. Okay,
so I
that's
eat
quite a bit.
about 4,000 to 1,200 calorie meals a day, pretty consistently. 4,500 calories every single day. And if I eat less, I'll lose weight.
That's a funny thing is, like, for me, I really have to suffer down if I want to lose weight, like fat wise. The muscle will go away, but also can gain it back reasonably easily as long as I maintain the caloric intake. So for me, it's always been a bit of a yo-yo. Depending on how much I invest, I can either be quite large and strong, assuming that I'm eating and training at top capacity. But if I don't do that, if I don't invest the time, and even if I restrict calories quite a bit, the weight just flies off.
Yeah, if I cut some calories, I would lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks, and I'd lose the other 10 pounds within 2 months.
Yeah,
no doubt.
No, it goes really, really fast. Yeah,
it goes really fast.
And then you're like, you got that emaciated look, right? Where people are like wondering, like, standing.
Yeah, then your face gets all sucked out. Everybody thinks you're sick. You got cancer or something. That's always where it goes.
I was dieting up until like 2 weeks ago, and about 2,500 calories, quite low. But again, my workout intensity is not that high, and even though I do cardio, I'm basically at the same position most of the day, besides cooking meals. So my caloric intake was quite low, just to stay lean while I'm coming off my cycle and get my wife pregnant. And then I got up to like sub 200 pounds, and then I had a mental cue like, wait, this can't be good. And now we got to increase the food a little bit. So now I went back up to like with 3,000 calories, 3,200.
How tall are you?
5'9". Yeah.
Okay.
5'9". Yeah,
I was thinking 200 would probably be. I'd scare people if I got to 200, and I wouldn't mind trying. I'd be super lean, but I'd scare people. They'd think I was dying for sure.
Yeah. I got a couple of those remarks. Steve, are you okay? Like, on camera, it looks good when you're extra lean, because you got these studio lights, and people are like, oh, Steve, you look so energetic and vibrant. And I'm like, well, I'm dying inside. I have no energy to do anything, and I'm dieting and
Yeah.
stuff. So now I increased it a little bit, so my face can be a little bit fuller and have some more energy. Because I will be coming to the Mr. Olympia again this year.
Oh,
and
good. I think we're going to have the same rhino cage. We're going to invite some lifters to come.
Okay.
Yeah,
maybe I can join in if I can get my wife pregnant before that time, and I can actually eat some good food and get on some TRT.
Oh, of course. I already have a strategy for my weight loss. I've just decided I'm going to go from 2X to XL to large. I'm just going to get smaller T-shirts. So I still feel tight.
Oh, right, yeah. You're still tight, right? Yeah. You make sure you make the logo even smaller, so it makes the shirt even look bigger.
Don't put on anything baggy. That's a bad idea when you're losing weight. That's a bad idea. Yeah. The site can't handle it.
Show off what you still got. Yeah, don't wear those XXL shirts that are still in the closet somewhere.
That's right.
Oh man, that hurts. Yeah, I give those to my wife. She likes it. She can roll around in those shirts.
Agreed.
Yes, I'll be at the Mr. Olympia, and I'll be at SWIS, which is 2 weeks ahead of time in Ohio.
Okay.
And you've presented there before.
I presented at SWIS so many years ago, and I may or may not end up presenting at SWIS this year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Maybe I'll sit next to you. Maybe I'll sit next to you. I'll be presenting also.
Awesome. You say it's in November or December? When is it?
It's in October. It's 2 weeks before the Mr. Yeah, 2 weeks before the Mr. Olympia. So end of October.
Yeah, I might end up at both places.
Yeah, so I'll fly in for SWIS, and then I'll probably come to Vegas just to hang out, and then I'll go to Florida, and then do the obligatory Disney World, because of course, still a kid. Yeah, even though I don't have kids, I love Disneyland and Disney World.
Well, I'll join you for all of that. And you come train with me in Vegas.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Hey, thanks so much for coming on, man. I think we can talk for hours, but I know you're a busy guy, and it's almost bedtime for me. So we're gonna wrap it up. Anything you want to give us some words of wisdom, because you're a wealth of knowledge, and you're in your mid-50s, so you've literally done everything already, and I've got a young audience that are really eager to listen to some good advice from you. Yeah,
well, man, I think we covered it pretty in depth. I think people are too hard on themselves. I think they set themselves up for failure by having either a diet program or an exercise program that's just not sustainable, or they can't adhere to with their lifestyle. And so I really try to design things now so that it's convenient and enjoyable. I bring my kids to the gym. I said, look, first and foremost, on the way to the gym, I tell them, I'll make sure this is fun. So don't keep doing the things you've always done, just thinking you have to. I found a lot of things to do in the gym that I really enjoy to keep it interesting and keep it fun, because there's no one right way. And so as long as you're consistent and invest a little bit of intensity, and that includes, all the stuff we talked about in terms of meal prepping. It's just everything I do, I try and make sure that it's convenient, and the time management is good, and I have a system in place, so I'm not spending hours, preparing food. I want to spend that time doing other things. Right. And so whether that's for business or with your wife and kids, that's ultimately more important. Exactly. And again, I think this hardcore lifestyle of powerlifting and strongman and bodybuilding, I think it's just a phase for all of us, and eventually we get out of it, and then hopefully we didn't ruin our health, but we have a solid foundation that we can maintain with minimal effort. Yeah, and I don't think you need to be in the gym that often, that long. My workouts are less than 45 minutes. I go 4 days a week, 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes, but that's 15 minutes talking bullshit about, how it is, right? Hey, what do you think about? And then before you know it, an hour goes by. So that's how it goes. Agreed. Well, thanks for having me on, brother. It was nice talking to your audience. Anytime. For sure. I'll see you soon. I'll see you at the Mr. Olympia, and maybe in Vegas right before that. Agreed. Thanks so much for coming on, Stan. Thank you, brother. Take care, buddy.